Hello and welcome back to the 31 Nights of Horror here on Jersey Nerds Productions. I'm Mitchell Lee alongside Tommy Grant. And Tommy, it's been, I think, a good start to our endeavor to watch 31 horror movies in the month of October. But I'm just going to go ahead and rip the band aid off here. I think that this part of the show, I think we're splitting it up into fifths or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
bring it down to 4 episodes.
I think this is kind of a week entry, and we'll just go ahead and get started with the one that I had been told for years and years and decades is like the scariest movie of all time, and that's The Exorcist.
hmm
This came out 1973, Tommy. So this one is over 50 years old, directed by William Friedkin. And actually, if you'd like to see me and Brandon too review another William Friedkin movie, he did the French Connection right before this, which won Best Picture in 1971. And one of the things that we said about that movie was it was probably a lot better. It's still a good movie, but probably a lot better in its time, given the way that they shot the action was very unique for 1971. But, now we have stuff like John Wick and Mad Max. And so it's not quite as unique and special as it was in the early 70s. And I think I can say a lot of very similar things about this in that, you know,
I
it
think
might
the
have been
big
scary
issue.
for people back in the 70s, or if you're very, very, very religious, which I am not. But yeah, this was just a fine movie to me.
Well, one of the big takeaways from this film is I do agree it is not as scary as it's hyped up to be. However, for the time that it came out, this was one of the first, if not the first, film about an exorcism. So the topic at the time was very taboo. So it was very careful with how they had to film it. The Catholic Church was even involved, basically giving them rules of what they could and could not depict in the exorcism because they didn't want them to have a bad look. Um, but as for Friedkin's involvement, I think his films just start off very slow. He does a very odd way of story building and kind of setting up all the characters to where you're sitting there going, how is this all connected and why do I care about these people? Then all of a sudden there's that moment, there's a scene where it all kind of clicks together and you're like, oh, now it makes sense. But like in the
See, it
first half
clicked
of the movie,
together a lot easier for me in French Connection than it did in this.
well, because I had only watched this once before and I was sitting down watching it and the whole storyline with the priest and visiting his mother and all these different things happening and I'm just sitting there going like, why the fuck do I care about this? Why is this? What does this have to do with the girl and the exorcist? And then finally, you finally get that scene where he all of a sudden just shows up at her house. And like, oh, I guess he's involved with this. But there was no like indication of his importance until like halfway through the movie.
I thought all the most interesting stuff in the movie had to deal with Damien Karras. Again, I saw this movie late last week, so the pronunciation just left me.
We're
But
not here
that
for
was,
pronunciation, so
yeah,
it's
the guy played by Jason Miller. I thought that was the most interesting character in the movie. Whenever he came on, that's when I kind of perked up a little bit, and I'm like, all right, let's see what this guy's up to, because I just didn't find Ellen Burstyn interesting. I just didn't. Maybe that's a flaw in on my end. But I just didn't
I don't
find
think
her
so. But
interesting.
I also thought that again, having this film come out in the '70s, I thought the practical effects were very good in this film. It wasn't scary, but they were at least fun to watch.
Yeah.
Especially with obviously the whole exorcism aspect of it. We had that infamous scene where, again, this was the first time we've seen it on camera for an exorcism. But when her whole head does the 360 spin, they used a
Hmm.
mechanical dummy to do that scene. Whereas I thought it was some pretty cool practical effects they threw in there.
Yeah. No, I think so as well. It's just one of those where I kind of, and this might be an unfair comparison. I wasn't around in the 70s or the 80s, so
Nor was
You
I.
know, forgive me, but so many movies have tried to replicate what Die Hard did, and yet when I watch that movie, I'm still like, okay, but this is like how you do it. This is like the top tier. Whereas when I watch The Exorcist, it's more like I don't really get that same feeling, you know? It feels more like I've seen this before and this is just another version of
Well,
that, but
this
this
was
one
the
happened to be
OG
the
version.
first one. Yeah,
And
this
again,
is just the one
because of the
that
topic,
inspired everything else.
because the topic they're covering, again, it was very taboo for the time, and the Catholic Church was involved. It was one of those things. It broke the ice, and what it's the film that allowed all of the other movies to happen. That's its importance in cinematic history. Whether it's the scariest, I don't believe that in the slightest. I was laughing at some points during the movie, but it's still just that classic ice breaking movie that allowed all these really scary exorcism movies that some of which we will be watching and have watched, like the Pope's Exorcist. That might have never have happened had this movie not
Oh,
come.
yeah, no, those movies are I mean, I think that movie I'm going to get killed for saying this, but I think that movie had to do a little bit more as far as like let's dig even deeper into the mysteries of the church, you know? Because if they didn't, then it would basically just be a remake of The
Well,
Exorcist.
for that we have the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, but I also don't like those movies. So
You know,
yeah,
I,
I'm not the biggest fan of those.
that's okay.
So, um
A couple of fun
I
facts, though, real quick about this
go
film.
ahead.
So I was reading into the director and what like he was known for just putting the actors through such misery
Oh,
while
really?
they
One of
filmed
those?
this movie. Because there's a couple scenes where you can see their breath on screen because I guess the room got very cold. He had the
Hmm.
set drop to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That way they could capture the breath.
You can kind of tell. I could definitely tell that it's freezing there, and
Yeah.
just the
And
way
there,
that it was filmed, I could tell that that was not some like after like let's make it look like that in post type deal. I'm like I can tell everyone's freezing.
yeah. And that, not only that, but he was also wanted to get real reactions on set for some of the scenes. So he actually brought a gun into the studio and fired the gun to get real live fear reactions out of the cast. That is insane. Like that would never happen today, but just that was just crazy. And then have you also heard the cursed production aspect of this movie?
No.
So this was another thing that made a lot of headlines for this film. A lot of people claim that the production of the movie was cursed. There was a fire that burnt down pretty much the entire set, with the exception of the room where they filmed the exorcism scenes, like her room. There's the only room that wasn't touched,
Hmm.
and there were several actors that were injured on set. And apparently, it was done. They think it was some sort of demon that was hurting them, but it was a very cursed set. So those are my big, quick fun facts for you. Now, question: do you know what the green liquid that she spits out of her mouth was?
Wasn't that like peas?
Pea soup.
Yeah.
Nasty
I
shit.
remember hearing that somewhere. Yeah. No, yeah, pass.
So those are my fun
Um
facts for this film.
and by the way, I've heard from some people that think that The Exorcist 3 is actually the best one in
I've
the
actually
whole.
not seen the sequels for this film.
Oh, I heard that the direct sequel to this, I think it's called Heretic,
Yes,
is truly awful, but that the third one is really good. And then the one that came out last year, I did see
that
that,
one I have seen.
and
Yes,
and that one sucks.
yeah, I that did not rope me in whatsoever.
No.
But
So I don't know if this has much. I mean, it's definitely a historical movie as far as like it has its place in film history, more
it's a
so than
movie,
any
yeah,
other movie that we're going to talk about, possibly in this entire series, but
yeah.
definitely of the movies we're going to talk about today for sure.
The middle of the
Um,
month was meant to be kind of a weak point. This was kind of just to throw a couple random films in there just to
yeah,
get some in there.
We put some
Uh,
classics at the beginning, put some classics at the end, and
yeah,
fill the middle with stuff where it's like, okay, I've wanted to watch that. Let's get around to it now.
yeah. Um, However, in terms of Oscars, this film actually was known. It was the first horror film to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. It also won two Oscars, one for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound Mixing. So it did have some
Okay.
success.
Was this before I would say makeup and hairstyling, but I don't know how much of that was makeup versus just like prop effects, because they
Yeah.
used they used whatchamacallit, they used a dummy for her head.
Yep.
So I I'm at a B minus 33.83%, which some people probably think is blasphemous, but I think that I probably bumped that up a little bit just due to my respect level for being the first one to do it and
I
kind of
think
keeping
that's
that in mind. But this is also a movie that I know for a fact I'm never going to watch again.
Yeah, but that's also the beauty of horror because we're scared by different things. And this film obviously was not a film that scared either of us because we have seen much scarier films.
Yeah.
Um, I would give mine a C plus 80%. I
Okay.
think
So
yeah.
I'm higher on it than you. All right. I did not expect that. I'll be
It
honest with
was
you.
too slow of a start for me. Like these some of the films that we've watched and we've kind of talked off screen for this one, but if it's got a slow start, it makes it very hard for me to keep watching. And there's
Hmm.
been a couple movies where I've had to like sit down a couple times just to get through it. This was one of them because the whole first half was way too slow for me. But
All right, let's get into the one. If you hadn't just written off my opinion, you know, get ready
if
because
you're
we're gonna
still
talk
listening,
about
thank you.
exactly. Yeah, if you haven't turned this off yet, we're gonna talk about Smile now, a movie that I'm going to see the sequel to this movie tomorrow.
And that is why
So
we put that in earlier in the month.
I will have to talk about that on next next week's edition, just kind of as a quick aside. But this movie came out 2 years ago, September 30th, 2022. Directed and written by Parker Finn, based on a short film that he made in 2020. And this was the horror movie that could 2 years ago, and that it was originally supposed to go directly to streaming, but they got a lot of positive test screenings on it. People liked it, and they're like, "All right, let's release this thing theatrically," and it did really well. And I got around to it like 3 weeks after it had come out. Usually, I see things immediately, but this one took me a little bit of time to get to, and I loved it. I'll be honest with you, Tommy. This movie gripped me, and I thought that it would not because it reminded me from all the marketing of a movie called Truth or Dare, where there's also scenes where people do really stupid smiles and then like kill themselves or hurt someone or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And that's one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Okay.
So I went in kind of like with PTSD, and turns out that I really, really enjoyed this movie.
It was a fun movie. For me, I ranked it lower just because it wasn't as scary for me. The jump scares in this movie were a little too predictable for me, so I saw a lot of it coming. There were a few scenes that did get me pretty good. Um, but back to its success, part of the reason they were so successful was they did a whole smile campaign. So I don't know if you remember
Yeah. Oh
this,
yeah. I
but apparently Paramount Pictures actually hired actors to sit behind home plate at Major League Baseball games, just grinning eerily into the cameras for extended periods of time. That's dedication. Like they wanted this film to do really well, and it does really well because I mean, just the cover of the film, that smile, it's creepy to look at. It might not be scary, but it definitely, it puts you on edge.
I think the thing that this film did really well is you definitely have that feeling of the walls closing in on you.
Yes.
And I think that you only get that character that feeling if you like your character, your main character that you're following.
Yeah.
And this character of Rose, plays by Sosie Bacon, Kevin Bacon's daughter. Um,
Oh, I did not know that.
that's yeah, yeah. That's Kevin Bacon's daughter, who we will be
Yeah.
talking about next week.
Yes.
Um, I thought that she was really good in this movie, and I thought that you got to know kind of her relationships with people really well. And there's a scene, like there's a bunch of scenes in this movie where I'm just like, I just like it, even if it doesn't scare me, it just bums me out because I'm rooting for this character so much, and I
Yep.
want for her to like get out of these bad situations. And there's a lot of times where she's kind of seeing things that aren't necessarily there, like at like some was it her, I can't remember the relation of this kid, the birthday party. Um
Oh,
and,
yes.
and she
Yeah,
just
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
freaks out, and I just felt horrible for her the whole time. um I don't go into horror movies necessarily with the mindset of scare me, which is probably the wrong way to do it. But any movie I
There's
watch,
no
I
wrong way to go about horror movies.
the way I go into any movie is, can you get me to root for the characters I'm supposed to be rooting for? Can you make me feel tension? Oh, whatever feeling I'm supposed to feel. If I'm supposed to feel tense, if I'm supposed to feel like, oh, I really want this character to get through this situation, then I give it the points. And this movie absolutely did that, to the point where I was a little bit disappointed that it's getting a sequel, because I thought it was a really nice standalone movie.
Yeah,
I
I
think
was very surprised that
it
they made
ends in a way that I did not expect it to at all, because it's not a happy ending. It's not, you know, a sunshine and rainbows.
it.
And I liked the fact that this movie was really willing to have the balls to go there.
Yeah.
Um, because a lot of these movies don't, and everything just wraps up in a bow and sunshine and rainbows and everything's okay. And this movie felt like the one that wasn't going to do that, and I'm glad that it took the chances it did.
Yeah, this film was a true version of psychological horror, which is a very unique niche in the horror
Which is,
realm.
it tends to be my favorite types of horror movies.
I enjoyed these a lot. Um, and in terms of the scare factor, this movie did not do it for me. But in terms of the story and the character, I loved it. So I was kind of very on the fence with this movie. But
It's
they
very familiar, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good time with it.
No, and it was one of those movies where you saw a good chunk of the jump scares in the trailer. So it's like you saw those scenes, you're like, oh, I know what's coming.
See, it also helped that I never saw a trailer for this movie before I saw it.
Yeah,
I don't know how, but they just never showed the trailer for this movie ever.
yeah,
So it worked a lot more on me having not seen that, because I watched the trailer after I saw the movie, and I was like, maybe I would have liked the movie a little bit less if I had seen this, because I would have known certain things were coming.
yep,
But the fact that I didn't, it just kind of lent to the suspense a little more.
yeah. And I think another aspect of this film that led to its success and a lot of people loved this movie is because it actually is relatable in a sense. Because this movie has very heavy themes of mental health,
Anxiety
suicide,
attacks, that type of thing.
anxiety, and I mean, who doesn't have who doesn't have anxiety nowadays? I mean, everybody's got some sort of anxiety
It's
now.
the hip new trend. I'm just kidding.
It is. I mean, but it's just it's the type of world we live in now. Everybody is just overworked, underslept. Everybody's anxious, so it's like everybody can relate to this film in some way, shape, or form. And those that have had the unfortunate events of having connections on other ends of this film, it just allows you to connect to the film that much more. But it's something that has a true aspect to it that makes it even scarier, knowing that types of things can happen in that sense. Which is why I think it might be getting a sequel, because the fact that seeing someone kill themselves has an effect on yourself, and that's kind of the trend that this
Yeah.
sets up, is that repetitive.
PTSD is also
Yeah,
a theme of this. So yeah, I'm a lot higher on this movie than I think a lot of other people were. And maybe it's just because of the fact that I didn't see the trailers. And so scares and things of that nature and just kind of where the plot was going was new to me, which maybe says that maybe I should watch the trailers less often and just go into movies 15, 20 minutes late and
It's
not see any of them. So,
that's a
uh,
very hard thing for me to do. I'm a sucker for just watching trailers and reading theories on films, and I wish
yeah,
I.
I'm the same. I'd love to go in having never heard any of the reviews, never seen any of the trailers, and just going completely blind. But yeah, that's just not gonna happen. This thing squeaked over to an A for me.
Yeah.
I gave this an A 1.34. So like bottom of the barrel A,
Okay.
but I thoroughly enjoyed this movie and going back to my 20 let me see something here real quick. My 2022 movie rankings. Let me see where it ended up on this thing. Okay, so in 2022 I saw 61 movies and Smile was number 20. So it was a pretty good movie. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the sequel does because I've
I,
heard good things about it.
I hope it has as much success and doesn't kind of cheap out like a lot of horror sequels tend to do.
No, I've heard great things.
I'm gonna give mine a B minus at 50%.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit more
Boo.
generous than what I did on Letterbox because it just didn't scare me as much. But the story and characters I love.
All right, let's get back to Cranky Mitchell. Let's talk about Jeepers Creepers. This movie came out in August of 2001. Um, it's directed by a piece of shit. I not much is saying that because I didn't like the movie. I'm saying that because this guy is apparently a giant pedophile.
Oh,
So yeah, no, he's got issues. Um, so I won't give him the name, even though hey, I didn't like the movie. But weirdly enough, this guy was like the protege of Francis Ford Coppola. So Francis Ford Coppola's production company uh helped finance the movie and produced it. So thanks, Frank. Um, this movie stars Gina Phillips and Justin Long, and they are a brother and sister that I'll be honest, for about half the movie, I just did not get brother sister vibes from them. I don't know what relationship I got between the two of them.
for
But
me, they gave off more of boyfriend ex boyfriend girlfriend kind of relationship.
maybe, yeah, but like distant, not like recent
Yeah,
exes. Like we dated in like middle school.
and we tried to rekindle things and be friends, but it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, but I just need someone to drive me from point A to point B and
Yep.
hey,
You're the only
you're
guy that
here.
answered.
Exactly. So, um and when they're driving this they see some weird stuff. They get they have a traffic incident with just a strange car and lo and behold they end up getting followed and they go back to kind of right some wrongs. I don't really know how to try to explain this without spoiling it, but I'll just say that the
I think
movie.
with how old this film is, I think you can spoil some things. I think that's okay.
Okay, well,
It's over 20 years old.
they're followed by this creature. I think they said that 23 every 23rd spring for 23 days. So kind of like Pennywise.
Yeah, it's
Uh
kind of a rip off of Pennywise.
yeah, every 23rd spring for 23 days it eats and there's this random lady that's just like, "Yeah, I see things in my dreams." And there's this weird song. I didn't like this movie, man. I
It was.
actually hated it.
I enjoy this movie for how bad it was. It was one of those. It was so bad it was good for me, but it's just it's so stupid. I mean the whole start of the film with the whole car chase. It's like you're passing by this house, you see this creepy guy dumping essentially looked like a body bag into the car and into a pipe, and you slow down to watch. And obviously, there's in that scene, he looks up and looks at them and rushes to his creepy truck mobile. that right there, it's like, don't slow down, keep fucking driving, hit the gas. Like, it's just so many scenes where you're just like, what are you doing?
This movie had dialogue that made me want to shoot myself in the head,
It
and
was very poorly written.
I really should have taken notes as far as the specifics go. But as bad as the dialogue was for the two main characters, whenever anyone else starts talking, it's so much worse.
Yes.
So I thought that if there was one saving grace, I think that once Justin Long gets out of the car and he goes down in that hole, and he once he kind of gets traumatized by what he's seen, I think that he's the saving grace of this movie, so to speak. And we'll talk more about Justin Long later today too.
Yes, we will.
Um, yeah, Justin Long in a lot of horror movies. But I thought that his performance got better as the movie went on. Maybe he just got a little bit more I don't want to say engrossed, but I think he kind of figured out what this movie was supposed to be as he got further along, and he was the only one that did.
See,
I don't know.
I'm gonna disagree on that one because I felt like the dialogue and the scenes got worse after that moment. Because there's
I
that dialogue
agree.
where he's sitting in the car, kind of in shock, obviously from what he just saw. But then the girl just kept screaming at him over and over and over, and just I'm like, all right, can you just shut the fuck up and drive? The man is
Oh,
traumatized.
I'm just limiting this to Justin Long's character. Only Justin Long's
But
character.
then when they
I
get to the
agree. The
when they
rest
get
of the
to the
movie got
diner,
worse as it went along.
yeah, and then when they get to the diner and they have that scene where basically the whole town just hides out in this diner, whether or not they knew what was going on, I'm not quite sure. They never quite allude to it,
They don't
but
react like people, but
no, it was
nothing
very weird. Like,
happens. No, it's just very strange.
but like the entire town was there, but like the whole time they're just screaming at each other at the phone. Who are you? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, yes, you do.
You
Yes, you
have the
do.
most useless police I've ever seen,
Oh yeah,
and then this lady just starts coming in
the
like
crazy cat lady.
I see things in my dreams, and like it's
He
very
was my favorite character. The goddamn crazy cat lady who just randomly
no.
knows where they are and who they are. How did she know their
No,
names?
that just seemed very convenient to me. There are some movies where like if I'm kind of feeling the vibe, I can go along with things, and I never felt this movie for one iota. So I just couldn't go along with it whatsoever. This movie didn't earn that. Maybe this movie was already working with borrowed time because I hadn't seen this before. I hadn't seen Jeepers Creepers 2 before, but I've seen Jeepers Creepers 3 before because me and Brandon got dragged along to seeing it because one of our friends uh, really wanted to see Jeepers Creepers 3 because it was in theaters for like one night and one night only, which is a giant red flag that it's
Yeah.
awful. But she was like, "Hey, can you guys come? I know you guys really like movies. Come see this with me, please. I really want to see this." We are like, "Hey, we haven't seen our friend from college in a minute. Let's go see this movie with her." And it's so bad I don't count it. But
Yeah, Jeepers.
also, I don't count it because it was only out for one night. So it's like, does it really even count? But it is legitimately like bottom three worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
And this kind of goes along with a lot of horror films. The whole horror industry is very well known for having a very low budget, getting a lot of money, and the studio going, "Wow, this film was a huge success. Let's greenlight a bunch of sequels for it because we made a lot of money off this first movie that had
Yeah.
like no budget." And this was one of them because it
This
had a
didn't
low.
have a micro budget. It had a budget of $10 million, which
Well,
like
this was a more
isn't a
higher end
lot.
example, but
Yeah.
you have a $10 million budget. It grossed 59 million worldwide. So all of a sudden, it's like, bam, greenlit for a second and third
Franchise.
movie. And yeah, obviously the sequels did not do as well as the first one did by any means. I feel like there was a fourth one. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
there is a fourth one, and you know what's scary? I've heard it's even worse than three, which
That
I
can't be
don't know
true.
how that's possible. But everyone that has seen both of those movies has said that it is I'm looking at the Jeepers Creepers Reborn Wikipedia page. It
Oh,
is
that's what it's called?
considered
Okay.
it is considered to be one of the worst horror movies and among one of the worst films ever made, which
Interesting.
is terrible because that was the exact reaction I had after the third one. So if this one's even worse, the third one has a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. The fourth one has a 0.
Interesting.
So I'm going to give, by the way, this one had a 46. So this one is very mixed, and Cinema Score hated this, which is just general audiences gave it a D. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is not a Cinema Score tends to be more negative towards horror, but also more negative towards movies that don't have a happy ending. And this one definitely doesn't. Um,
I know
but
for Rotten Tomatoes, it was a 45 for critics and 49 for audience
mhm.
for Jeepers Creepers. So it just was kind of middle of the pack.
I'm going to give it a D, 35.20%. Did not like it. Very similar grade that I gave The Nun 2 last year. And that was bad.
I'm gonna give this a C plus, 60%, just because of how laughable it is. It's one of those films that it's not a good quality movie, but it's just a fun, stupid movie to watch during the horror season. So that's where I'm going with that one. But Jeepers Creepers as a franchise, it was never one I enjoyed. It was very subpar for me.
All right. Speaking of subpar, let's go to The Strangers. This one came out in the summer of 2008, directed by Brian Bertino. And this one stars Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman. It's another cheap movie, $9 million, made 82 million. So this one really cleaned up. And this movie, it's about a couple. And if there's one thing that I do really like about this movie, it's kind of the framing device that they used for it, where it's this couple and it kind of picks up in the middle of an argument that they're having. They just got back from what was supposed to be a big event where Scott Speedman's character proposed to Liv Tyler's character, but she turned it down. And they have a bunch of arguing and talking about that. Meanwhile, there are these people that are trying to break into they're trying to break into their house. And this movie also spawned I don't want to say a sequel, but
I know there's
something along
spin-off
those lines.
films off of the
Yeah, The
off,
Strangers
off
Pray
of
at
the two
Night,
characters, but
and then they're attempting to do a trilogy. The first, called Strangers Chapter 1, came out this year. I haven't seen it, but I've heard nothing but awful things.
it's
And The Strangers Pray at Night came out in 2018, and that was one of my least favorite movies of 2018. I thought it was terrible, with the exception of there was one cool scene by a pool that kept the movie from being in like my bottom 3 for that year.
okay.
But apart from that, it is uh, I will say that it is stereotypical dumb white people, the movie. Um, to where it's like, hey, let's go investigate what's going on in here. And where like every other person would be like, no, let's leave. And so as a result, people die. This movie, however, it's not necessarily stupid, although there is stupidity in it to be sure.
Yeah.
I just thought that it was remarkably boring. And it's an hour and 25 minutes. This movie is brief, but it doesn't have a good pace to it. It feels
It
like it's
doesn't.
2 hours, at least to me personally, because there's so much. They're trying to get you so invested in their personal drama so
Yeah.
that when things start happening and people break in, you care. But I just so very clearly wanted, like, all right,
But
I don't
honestly,
necessarily hate either one of you. You two just I things have run their course, and
it
you're
made no
both kind of
sense.
fighting that.
It was one of those films where you're just kind of thrown into the middle of their relationship at the lowest point. You have no background as to who they are as people or how deeply in love they are, aren't. It's just all of a sudden they're coming home. He proposed, she turned him down, and then they just start eating ice cream and drinking champagne. And then he leaves, and then people show up. Like there's nothing to get you connected to these characters where you actually give a shit about them. And that was one of the weaker points for me about this film. But in terms of horror and why this movie did so well is because of the fact that home invasions are a thing in this country, as we all know.
Hmm.
And it's a very they play on the trope of isolation because the people come and really start hitting the house once the boyfriend leaves. So you have that trope of, girl home all alone, defenseless, and these strangers come in the middle of the night to break into the house to kill them. And that's what hits for a lot of people because I'm sure a lot of people after seeing this movie went home, locked their doors, locked their windows.
Got a security system.
Yeah. And it was also around that time, where the world was kind of changing. You have people saying, when I grew up, like, we left the doors open and unlocked. We always answered the door when someone knocked. Nowadays, doors are always locked. We rarely check the door when someone comes to the door. You just kind of wait and hope they leave. At least that's what I do. But it's like this kind of came out around that time period where things were changing, where people stopped just answering the door for whoever was there. It was more of a term of isolation.
Yeah, it's to the point where I feel like this movie was like, I know it was before its time. I feel like this movie was produced by Ring doorbells, where it's like, hey, go ahead and have some like cameras and see who's outside, or 80 security systems,
I,
but
I guarantee you, I have not seen the sequel, but I guarantee you the sequel or the one coming out has goddamn ring cameras involved. And you have a
the
creepy scene of
second
them just like looking into the
the,
camera.
the second one, okay, the second one's the dumbest thing I've ever seen because it takes place at like a trailer park, but like an abandoned trailer park that like they're like, yeah, no, everyone at this trailer park's like on vacation. It's like, what? Huh? Like everyone at the same time? Like it was very strange. It was bizarre. And no, there wasn't any like, but maybe this newer one that came out this year does. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I need to get to it.
I'm putting $20 down if there is.
Might end up being in my bottom 10 worst movies of the year from what I've heard so far. But this movie, I've never been a big fan of Liv Tyler as an actress. I'm not a big fan of Scott Speedman as an actor, so I didn't really buy them necessarily. I thought you needed better actors to carry this material
Yeah.
because you do ask them to, for 85 minutes of this movie, half of it is just their drama,
Yep.
right? Before you get any of the stuff that you actually came to the movie to see, you just get their personal drama and going through, well, why didn't you want to marry me? And this, that, and the other. And like, if you look at the plot synopsis of this movie on Wikipedia, it's 6 paragraphs long. I'd say like 4 of these paragraphs are like the last 15 minutes of the movie
Yeah.
because so much of this movie is just them talking, and then they kind of like blow off, someone coming to the door or something like that, and then they start to take it a little bit more seriously, and like it makes sense how they progress it, but they don't do it in a way that flows well
Yeah.
because it just kind of feels like nothing's going on, and then suddenly everything's happened, and it doesn't work quite that well for me personally. I was very bored with this. I don't know how this kind of uh it really caught on in 2008. I know a lot of people um my age really, cuz this came out when I was just before I turned 14. So
Yep.
a lot of people my age really got into this movie. And I'm like, "Wow, you don't fucking own homes." Um but I'm gonna give it a C minus 36.14. I didn't hate it. I just wasn't it didn't do anything for me. And it had a 49% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it didn't really move the needle too much.
Mine was a D, 20%.
Ooh.
I
Ooh.
did not care for this film at all. It was one of those films. This could have been a 20-minute short.
Yeah, I think it would have
You-
worked so much better as a short.
Because I felt like this movie was stretched out, and they were like, "We have an idea, we just don't know how else to make it better, so we're gonna stretch it out as long as possible." Again, with all the drama that was unnecessary to the plot. There wasn't really even a plot because there's the infamous line of why are you doing this? Because you were home. It was just we
Mm.
just picked your house out of random, which I thought was very silly. Um, and there's so many instances where they leave the house, have a chance to escape, but then circle back to the house to get the other one. And it's just a continuous rotation of one person almost escaping, then going back. Then the other person almost gets out and then comes back. I'm
Yeah.
like, this could have been a 20-minute movie and up the scares level, and it could have been good, but it bored the hell out of me.
This could have been a short upload, not like a YouTube short. It's not that short, but like a short film uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah,
And I think it would have done its job as a 15 to 22 minute short film.
yeah.
But instead we have barely qualifying as a movie at 85 minutes, and even then it feels very stretched out, which if
And
you can say that about an
the acting
85-minute
was
movie, that's rough.
and the acting was poor. As much as I love Liv Tyler because of Lord of the Rings, and she was in the Hulk, I think that year as well. But
Yeah,
she's
that
not
came out a
great.
few weeks afterwards.
Like the acting
I
wasn't that
didn't like
great.
her in that either.
Nothing hooked me in.
I've just never been a Liv Tyler person. I'm glad she had a very small role in Lord of the Rings, at least from what I remember. It's been a while since I've seen those movies, but
It was minor.
um, all right, let's talk about Jennifer's Body, which was one I was excited to watch, um, because I had quite the ride with this thing from the last 15 years, even. And I'll be honest about this because it's not going to make me look particularly good. I remember I really wanted to see this movie when I was 15 because I heard
It's
Megan
Megan
Fox was going to get naked. And then I heard that didn't happen. And so I was like, well, the movie doesn't look good. So I'm not going to see it.
I mean,
And
let's
the
be
year,
honest. What teenage boy did not have some sort of crush on on Megan Fox back in the mid 2000s?
yeah, that was
Transformers was what really set her career up,
the
but
first
it didn't
one
really
of the
come.
first movies that I saw because it was the summer of 2009 that I really started going to movies and where things kind of really started for me as far as loving movies. And so I saw that trailer for Transformers 2 a lot. And so I wanted to see the movie, and my dumbass loved that movie as a kid. I watched it the other day, and
Oh yeah,
it's terrible.
it's bad,
But
but you know what? It's one of those things that it was a fun movie at the time. It still is a fun movie, but just not with actors.
I don't agree. I think it's terrible now, but I think it is Transformers is to teenage boys what Twilight is to teenage girls, where it like scratches all the right itches, it sucks to high
Yep.
heaven, but if you're in that demographic, you will enjoy it.
Yeah.
Um and
Do you
so
want to hear? If
Jennifer's
you want to hear
Body,
Shia LaBeouf screaming every 5 seconds, that's
exactly.
the
You
film.
know what? I that actually I it kind of works for me. I'm not gonna lie. That especially in the third movie, I'm like, you know what? I kind of relate to this character. You know, I've wanted to do that quite often. But this movie came out in September of 2009, and it has since taken on kind of a life of its own. It's become kind of a Wikipedia is calling it a feminist cult classic, and that's exactly what I would call it.
Absolutely.
As far as it's a movie that a lot of people have re-examined over the years as well. They really sold it as like, come see Megan Fox like get naked or whatever, but really this movie like does a lot of things really well as far as horror goes. And if you had gone into it uh judging it for the movie that it is rather than the movie that they kind of marketed it to be, which Megan Fox, the writer and the director of this movie, have all been like, yeah, 20th Century Fox totally screwed us with how they marketed this thing. Um, I thought that this movie was a lot of fun. I enjoyed a lot of it, but I can only go so high with it because so much of the dialogue in this movie made me want to throw myself out of a window.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel late 2000s. It feels mid 2000s in the way that people talk, to
Yes.
where like they're like,
It was
yeah,
hard to listen to.
we're going to see the lead singer of this band. He's extra salty. I'm like, what? Maybe he should take a shower. Like, huh? Like people say things like that where they're like very like just bitchy dialogue. And I'm not just saying that because like, oh, teenage girls, I'm saying this as in like if you heard anyone say some of the dialogue that they say in this movie, you would just be like, why should I take you seriously as a
Yep.
person? And I should have written some of this stuff down because it was so fresh in my mind that some of the dialogue in this was just brutally bad.
And honestly,
Just
that's part of what
terrible.
knocked the score for this movie down for me. I thought it was a really fun film. This was the first time I had seen it. It was a very fun film, but the dialogue is just painful to listen to. And going to what you were saying earlier, like I was reading into a little bit, and the fact that the movie did so poorly because their marketing team fucked up so badly. Because this film has a lot of LGBTQ themes to it, especially we have the whole Megan Fox Amanda Seyfried kiss towards the
Mm.
end, and they were even saying like they try to amp up the sex appeal of Megan Fox to get teenage boys to come see this film, and they didn't even try to target teen girls or the LGBTQ community. Had they done that, this film might have actually done better than what it had.
Okay, but you get. I found some lines. I found some lines like
Oh boy.
like for example, knock it off, Chip. You're a penis cheese, or you're Jello. You're lime green Jello, and you can't even admit it to yourself.
But nobody talked like that.
No,
We grew up in that time period. We did not talk like that. Nobody fucking talked like that.
I said some dumb shit in 2009. Let me tell you, I think 2009 was when I was at the peak of saying my dumbest shit,
Yes, I
and
agree because I knew
I
you were on that
didn't
time period.
talk like this. Now, there's a
At no
possibility, and
point in
again,
our at no point have I ever heard the term penis cheese come out of anybody's mouth that I knew at that time,
no,
or
no.
refer to
Also,
people as lime green Jello.
yeah,
Hey,
no.
don't diss on
I,
lime green Jello. Lime
uh,
green is pretty underrated.
do you need a tampon? Looks like you might be plugging. Huh?
I
Like,
laughed so
okay,
hard at that line. It was so
I'm not.
stupid.
I'm not gonna lie to you. All right, I think this movie. If I watch this movie again, my grade might go up because the further I got along in it, I don't know whether it wore me down or I got Stockholm syndrome to this movie, or I was just like, you know what, I'm on the ride with it. But the
So
last 10 to 15 minutes of this, I also thought it really ended well. I actually really liked, for as bad as the dialogue is in this, I think there's a lot of really good like I think Megan Fox is really good in this movie.
yeah,
She has a lot of awful dialogue to deal with, but I think just as far as like their performance goes and her just giving it 130%,
yeah.
she really dives in. Amanda Seyfried's really good in this thing. Um, I thought that Johnny Simmons as Chip. I thought that he was a character that I really liked as well. I liked his relationship with Amanda
Oh,
Seyfried, and I thought that they were a
let
couple
us
that I really
let us
wanted to see
not
go
forget.
places.
Let us not forget to mention Chris Pratt. I was not expecting to see him in this movie.
I wasn't expecting to see J.K. Simmons in this thing, and if I'm
Oh
being
yeah, I
honest
forgot
with
about
you,
J.K. Simmons. He had hair. That's what threw me off.
and if I'm going to be honest with you, he had no damn reason to be in this movie. He has no
No,
point, no purpose, and half of his dialogue is just stupid as hell. And the way that he talks in this movie is just there's just so many weird things about it. And I'm glad that the people that really liked this movie found it. I actually know a lot I know a lot of bisexual women that have said that this was kind of a awakening for them, and
Yes,
like, yeah, I get that. I totally understand that. Um,
that's the
but
power
also,
Megan Fox had in the mid two
I'm
thousands.
telling you, it was something else. It was something else. I don't know anyone else that's doing it quite the way that she did, but um, I think that this movie, while I might not give it the highest grade, I'm definitely not the target audience for this movie, despite the fact that 20th Century Fox really tried to market this to me directly.
Well, they
Even
tried to
though
target to you like 15 years ago.
yeah, they did. But the funny thing is, I couldn't even buy a ticket. I'd have to sneak in because it was
Yeah,
rated R. Now it was 15. I'd have to sneak in, which I was doing a lot of that in 2009. I'll be honest with you, but um, I didn't do that for this, and I saw this for the first time, and I can't go too high with it because there were so many, and for the first half, before it really gets into the horror aspect of things, it's painful to watch. I'll say that it's painful
yeah.
before it starts getting into the horror aspect of stuff. But this movie also, this is an hour 42-minute movie that I think is paced pretty well. Especially in the second half. I think this movie really finds its footing once
Yeah.
Megan Fox is actually going around and, let's get to a tiny bit of the plot for this. She's going around and she's offered up as this ritualistic sacrifice to this indie band that wants to get famous, which I thought that was funny, if I'm being honest. I thought that once they go more comedic with that band, I thought that was the right choice. Um, and it fails, and she ends up becoming like this demon that has to eat, and she just goes around eating boys because she's Megan Fox and can just lure them in with sex and eat them. Um, and
Which is funny because all she would have had to tell them is, "Hey, I'm not actually a virgin," and she could have saved her life.
but that was a classic twist on things,
Yeah.
to where usually in the movies, it, like, for example, we'll talk about Friday the 13th next week, where it's like usually in horror movies the virgins are the ones that live.
Yep.
So she's thinking, all right, if I tell them that, then I'll
That's
get out
cool.
of it.
Yep.
So I thought that was a nice twist on things, but for me it's a C, 27.87. But if I had to choose between watching this or The Exorcist again, I would rather watch this again.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like if I watched this movie again, I would like it more. And I left The Exorcist saying that's a one time watch, never gonna watch it. I
Yeah.
guarantee I will be watching this movie again at some point. So this grade will probably go up, but I just can't because the penis cheese and the Jello and the whatever other food items. No, there's so much negative about this movie that I can only give it so much. But I'll be watching it again. It's very entertaining.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna give my C 20%. It's kind of around that same thing for me. But again, horror movies, you have the films that are meant to be scary and you're meant to be scared shitless. And then there's kind of the comedy horror, which is definitely where this film falls in.
Yeah,
These are the fun rewatches. These are the ones where you go into it knowing, all right, this is gonna be a goofy movie because you've seen it already. So you get the popcorn, you get a drink, and you just sit down and have a fun time watching it.
absolutely. No, I could definitely see myself watching this again. All right, let's close this out. Let's stay in the year 2009. All right, May 29th, 2009. Do you know what movie came out, Tommy?
Drag Me to Hell.
Do you know what other movie came out that day, Tommy?
uh 2009.
I'll give you a hint. It's a hell of a 1-2 combo with this thing.
It's not Harry Potter, is it?
No, good guess, but no,
Twilight.
no.
I got nothing.
Up. Yeah,
Like
the
Pixar's
Pixar
Up?
movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
Up. Yeah, that came out the same day. So you have Up, and then they should just call this Down.
Yeah, they had no competition.
Yeah,
Which is funny because this was Sam Raimi's big return to horror.
yeah, It was the
because
perfect counter programming to Up.
yeah,
Um, and this did decently well, but I don't ever think that this movie was going to be some massive giant hit. Um, directed, written by Sam Raimi, and we will get into Sam Raimi next week plenty with the Evil Dead
we
trilogy.
have a
Which,
big, heavy Sam Raimi
yeah,
presence in the center of the month because he's a very he's not the big household name in terms of director, but he is
well, you
huge in the
might know him more for Spider Man.
well. That's what I was saying because he was huge in the '80s and '90s, obviously with the Evil Dead franchise, and he had a lot of other films that he
Dark
worked on
Man.
with his friend Bruce Campbell.
Yeah,
But he had the big success with the Spider-Man films, and this was kind of his way to come back. And he came back swinging because this film, I loved it. I had
I
not,
yeah.
I had not
Um,
seen this film before, and I was pleasantly surprised with how good this film was.
I remember again. This was a trailer that I had seen one time, and I didn't really have any interest in seeing it because this was years before I even considered watching horror movies. So I and this might have been the reason why, because I thought the trailer was actually quite scary. Um, but this is a movie about a girl named Christine, and she works at a bank, and her boss is kind of giving her crap for, hey, you need to be the one that makes tough decisions if you want this promotion. So there's this older woman, and she says, all right, I can't give you another extension on your mortgage. And this woman puts a curse on her, and the
Well, hang
curse
on now,
is,
hang on. Not just that, the woman got down and begged in
yeah,
the middle of the bank, and she shamed her for begging, called security. That's when the curse was put on
yeah,
because she
because
got a little
she,
too far, and she was getting handsy. She was grabbing the her
yeah,
purse
that
or something.
that's where I think that she kind of got, definitely crossing the line. Then waited for her ass in the parking lot, which is definitely
Dude,
a no no.
that
But
was that scene was like, all right,
see,
I know this is gonna be a good movie because that was
see,
scary as
that got me
shit.
more than anything in
That
Strangers.
that was horrifying. I was actually sitting
Yeah,
like on the couch going, like, holy fuck, like this is intense.
I loved this movie. I absolutely ate this up. I had a great time with it. Allison Lohman, who retired from acting shortly after this because I guess she had kids and she was like, you know what, she might have had triplets or something. Like, I know she has 3 kids now. I don't know, but she was like, I'm going to retire from acting and just be a mother, which, good for her if that's what she
Yeah.
wants to do. But I also think that we missed out on a lot of great performances because she's a really talented actress
Yes.
and is phenomenal in this movie. This is a character that you root for. This is a character that you're behind her with her work struggles, with her relationship struggles because she's dating Justin Long, who is
Makes his other arm
fantastic,
return.
fantastic in this movie. I thought that he played the I don't want to say the typical boyfriend role, but he played it in a way that I liked them together. Because a lot of times they'll just go the easy way out and make the boyfriend a douchebag,
Yeah.
and they didn't do that with her. Um, and because of that, it takes a lot of interesting twists, and she's seeing this medium. I don't know what to call this guy as far as his
I think there's a more in-depth title to him, but for the sake of conversation, I would say just call him a medium.
Yeah, which by the way, I knew that this movie was going to be great when I saw him because he is in Inception, and he's the chemist in Inception. He's the one that's driving the car. When
I
it
have
when it
actually
when it
not
when it
seen Inception.
wait, hold up,
Yeah,
what?
you
You
heard me
haven't seen?
correctly. I Christopher
All right,
Nolan
so
films are the ones
November is going to be the month of it's going to be Nolan November. There you go.
I'm down for it.
That's just what's going to happen because I can't stand for this. That's my favorite movie of all time. Yeah, I can't stand for this.
All right, well,
Um,
November will be Nolan
but
education month for me.
uh, please, but yes, he's in this, and they could have played him off. He could have been a really goofy character that And he did have some comedic elements with some things as far as like payment and that kind of stuff. I thought some of
Yeah.
that was funny, but I thought that this character was someone that it was genuine, and they could have just played him off as this kooky, like weird guy, but he was an actual source and a help, and he seemed just as invested in it as she was. And it's this character that you're rooting for, and you want her to get rid of this curse. It has so many twists and turns, and I do not want to spoil the end of this movie because I know it's been out for 15 years and it was spoiled for me. Actually, I think I kind of have to talk about it a little bit.
Oh
So
yeah,
for
we
the
can talk
next
about it.
for the next like 2
Spoiler
minutes,
alerts are
okay?
coming.
For the next 2 minutes, I'm going to keep an eye on this clock here. We're not going to talk about it for more than 2 minutes. The end of this movie. So if you're not ready,
Starting
if
now.
you all right, I mean, it's in the title. It's on the poster. If you're looking at the poster, she's being dragged down to hell.
Yeah.
If you can read the poster itself, it says Christine has a great job, a great boyfriend, and a bright future, but in 3 days, she's going to hell.
Yeah.
And she does. And this movie makes you think that you are about to get the happy ending that a lot of movies give. And I think it would have been a well deserved happy ending.
Yeah.
But the fact that at the very,
She
very
killed her
end of the
goddamn
movie,
cat. She killed her
yeah, she
goddamn
does.
cat for this.
Yeah. And you already know that she is very much she's very much an animal lover. But at the
Yeah.
very, very, very end of this, the button gets given back to her and she just goes down to hell. And I thought that was such a like I if I'd seen this movie in 2009, I would have hated it. I would have hated
I,
not the movie, but the ending.
I
But
had the same reaction as she did watching the film because when she had passed off the button, I was like, in the back of my head, I was like, they're probably gonna have this be a twist where it's still in his car and he like has it. But I thought the boyfriend, I thought Justin Long's character was gonna be the one that got dragged to hell. So when all of a sudden he pulls it out and hands it to her, I'm like, oh fuck, she's gonna die. and
and
it
it's
does.
so sudden, and then
Yeah.
it just ends, and I'm like, that is how you end a damn horror movie.
I sat back
That
and
is how you do it right there.
that like it was so dumb because like the whole movie had no point to it, but at the same time it's just like, all right, spoiler time over.
All right, those 2 minutes are over. Welcome back. It's done. I will just say that this movie has balls. This movie has the guts to make decisions that other horror movies just don't have. It has the guts to show things. It's nasty, but it's not gory. At least as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of really good shots in this movie.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that this is an instant scream queen legend performance from Alison Lohman. As far as I'm concerned, this is apart from maybe definitely Jack Nicholson in The Shining, because that's one of my favorite performances in the history of movies, if I'm being honest. Apart from The Shining and maybe Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, because I mean, come on, he's just
Yeah.
amazing in
Killed
that.
it.
Alison Lohman in this movie is my favorite performance, apart from those two, of any movie that we've talked about so far. I
Okay.
think that she is instantly iconic in this, and I don't know what the 15 years later the legacy of this movie is, but I am very upset with myself for having not watched it sooner, because this is one that because I'm going back and kind of reworking lists and trying to rewatch stuff and remake top 10 lists to fit more of what I feel now, rather than what I did in like 2011 or 2012 when I was stupid 17-year-old or
Hey,
whatever.
we're allowed to have
um,
different opinions, Mitchell. That's the whole
exactly
point of growing.
exactly and I think that this movie will make my top 10 for 2009. When I do that, 2009 was a strong year for movies. I think that this movie would make my top 10 I thoroughly enjoyed this thing. It's an A, and I'm gonna give it. Let's see, where'd I end up with this? 64.64%. I really loved this movie, and I'm going to try to buy it on DVD soon because I feel like I'm going to come back to this every Halloween.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an A as well. Probably 25%. I really enjoyed this film, and it definitely helped that I haven't seen it before. I don't remember the trailers. However, the ending was partially spoiled because now looking back, I remember seeing on social media that that scene played a lot. And after I saw it, I was like, oh, I do remember seeing this. I just forgot it was this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it was such a fun film.
All right. Well, that wraps things up for nights 7 through 12 of the 31 Nights of Horror. Next up, Friday the 13th, the
Part one,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original,
the original.
Evil Dead, or sorry, The Evil Dead,
Yeah, the original.
the original, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, Wrong Turn. Those are the next. Wrong Turn doesn't really fit
It
in that
doesn't.
group. But you know what? That's fine. Drag Me to Hell didn't really belong in this group because I liked the movie, but you know, it
If
is
we
what it
want,
is.
if you want, we can split the order and put Children of the Corn in for Wrong Turn and swap them.
I'm fine with leaving it as is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fine with leaving it as is. So we'll have, because then we can start off with some of the older stuff the next time, not to spoil
Yeah.
what's coming up, but some really fun stuff, some classic stuff to watch. We had a lot more of the newer type movies in this one. But if you left anything from this video, or if the video, you're saying damn video, it's an audio recording. Watch Drag Me to Hell. Give it a chance. It's on a lot of streaming services. Give it a chance, and also, I think we both really. Well, I liked Smile more than you did. And if you're a woman, Jennifer's Body. If you're a dude, Jennifer's Body. It's a fun time, you know, and you get to look at Megan Fox. So, you know, you'll have fun as well. So, you know, we got 6 more days of horror coming at you soon. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.
Stay spooky.